Hey guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Today's video is the first video in 2021, which is super exciting. 2020 was a little bit crazy. Hopefully 2021 will be a little bit calmer, although I don't really see it going that way, but we can hope for that. I am having to force myself to film this video right now because I am feeling so beyond lazy today. I am still wearing my pajama pants right now. I am just so lazy. But I'm really excited to share today's case with you guys, so let's get right into it. Today we are going to be discussing an incident that is known as the Falcon Lake incident, which takes place in Falcon, Manitoba in Canada. The case that we are going to be talking about today does involve aliens and UFOs, which I think is super exciting because this could very well be one of my favorite topics to discuss with you guys on this channel. I absolutely love talking about cases that involve aliens, cases that involve UFOs. I just think they're absolutely fascinating, so I'm really looking forward to sharing this one with you guys. This all starts on May 20th, 1967, when a man by the name of Stephen McKillick, I hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly, went out. He woke up really early in the morning and he left his home and headed towards Falcon Lake, Manitoba. He went to Falcon Lake, which was located inside of Whiteshell Provincial Park in Manitoba, and here he would be studying and prospecting silver and quartz. Stephen was a mechanic and he was also an amateur geologist, which is why he had such a large interest in prospecting for things, again, like silver and quartz. Again, Stephen had woken up early that day to head out to that specific area, and once he was there, he found this quartz that he was kind of carving away at. He stopped doing what he was doing and started to eat lunch, and by the time that he was finished eating his lunch and went to return to kind of carving out this quartz, that is when he was kind of startled by this really loud sound of cackling geese. But it wasn't like normal geese flying overhead or something like that. It was very obvious to him that these geese had been frightened beyond repair by something in the area. After hearing this sound, I'm sure that Stephen thought that he could have possibly been in danger, so he kind of started looking around, and almost immediately after hearing the sounds that these birds were making, that is when something caught Stephen's attention. What this was two very large cigarette-like shaped objects glowing in the sky just above Stephen. After he had noticed these objects, that is when he had clearly seen one of these objects take off, and the second one was very obviously going to continue on its way down until it had landed about 150 to 160 feet away from where Stephen was standing on this kind of like flat rock bed type area. Stephen would later describe this craft as being about 35 feet in diameter. It was very well lit up and looked like a bowl with a dome on top. He said that this craft made a humming-like sound and seemed to emit a sulfur-like stench. He would later say that at first he thought that this craft could have been a military ship, and so he kind of sat back for around 30 minutes and just sketched a drawing of exactly what this ship looked like. After sitting there for a while, Stephen had noticed that there was this door on the ship that appeared like it was open, and you could distinctly hear other voices coming out of that door-like area. Assuming that this still was a military ship of some sort, thinking that they might be having some mechanical problems, and with Stephen being a mechanic, he figured that there was a possibility that maybe they were somehow stuck here, and he might be able to help the people inside of this ship out. With that thought, Stephen started to approach the ship, just yelling out to the voices that he could hear coming from inside, saying that he was walking up to the ship and that he wanted to help them if they needed help. But as soon as he started speaking, that is when the voices inside of the ship completely ceased and stopped altogether. Stephen also noted that as he approached the ship, the sulfur-like smell was becoming much thicker the closer that he was getting to this craft. Something that I had forgotten to mention before all of this, before he had approached the craft, is that Stephen had said that while he was hearing these voices inside of the ship speaking, he definitely thought that the creatures or the beings inside of the ship were speaking English, and he said that they definitely sounded like they were human, and it sounded as if one of the voices was of a higher pitch than the other, but they did sound to be human and they were speaking English. So at this point, Stephen is walking up to the craft and he's yelling out, hoping to be able to be some kind of help to these people who are on this craft. And as he started yelling out, nobody was answering him. The voices had completely stopped, and so he decided to just kind of stick his head through the opening of that door-like area that was on the ship. He said when he did so, all he could really make out was this light maze that he could see on the inside of the ship, and after sticking his head in, it appeared really quickly that a 3-door panel slid across behind Stephen, completely closing off the entrance to the ship. Because this 3-door panel had dropped down so quickly, it had caused Stefan to kind of step back, and with that, he ended up brushing the exterior of the ship, which ended up being so extremely hot that it had burned right through Stefan's gloves. After taking a quick notice of the heat on this craft and on Stefan's now hands, the craft had taken off from the ground and was rotating in a clockwise rotation, and when it took off, there was a grid-like exhaust on the side, and shortly after noticing this, large amounts of gas had been shooting out of this vent, causing Stephen's entire outfit, his clothes, everything that he had on, to go up completely in flames. Later on, Stefan would also say that after the ship had taken off, he was overtaken by extreme nausea and became violently ill. However, to this day, we are not able to determine whether he was violently ill because of something that was coming off of the ship, or because of the severe burns that Stefan had had now all over his entire body. After this, Stephen recalled wandering around in that area for a very long time, trying to figure out how to get out of the woods and back to his family. He was having an extremely difficult time with this, and it ended up taking him a total of 9 hours to find his way out of Falcon Lake. Once he did, he arrived home and he told his wife that he was feeling extremely nauseous and something horrible had happened and he was covered in all of these burns. And so with that, he actually took his own self to the hospital. When Stefan had arrived at the Winnipeg hospital, the first thing that was noticed about him was this really thick sulfur-like scent that was coming off of his body, and that would end up lasting for weeks even after he had this encounter. The second thing that was quickly noticed by hospital staff was the grid-like pattern burns that were all over Stephen's body. This lined up with the grid-like patterns that Stephen had described being on the side of the ship that was shooting out gasoline when it took off. For the next few weeks, a lot of tests were done on Stephen. They had tested him for radiation poisoning because nobody was too sure exactly what had happened to him, but these tests came back negative. For the next few weeks, Stefan would suffer from diarrhea, rapid weight loss, vomiting, nausea, blackouts. Just, he was going through an extremely tough time as a result of having an encounter with this strange ship. What I think makes this UFO encounter case particularly interesting over other ones that I've covered in the past is right away it seemed that the government and the police had taken this case extremely seriously and they started to investigate it almost immediately. As you can imagine, this was huge news, and once it got out to the public, Stefan's family home was no longer like a safe haven for the family. It was constantly being visited by RCMP officers, government agencies, people who just wanted to, see the house, like interested members of the public, and of course, the media. Once Stefan had started to kind of recover from this incident, and it was a few weeks after this had all happened, but he was slowly getting better, that is when he contacted one of his friends, and the two of them headed back to Falcon Lake, to the exact area where Stefan had had this experience and where he was caused all of this trauma. I do think that some people really criticize Stefan for going back to the area so soon, but personally, I don't think it's that strange, because if I was going through something like this that nobody could explain to me, and I was having all of these health issues and whatnot because of an incident like that, I think I would want to return to the place as well. Once they had returned to Falcon Lake, they were investigating the area, and that is when they found a huge burned out semicircle in the ground, exactly where Stephen had said that he had had this incident. On top of that, it appeared that all of the branches and sticks and the natural trees and things like that that were in the area had all had burn marks. They had all been extremely damaged. Now, after realizing all of this, Stefan had then went home and contacted the RCMP and brought them out to show them what he had seen, but they still couldn't explain anything that Stefan had gone through. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the investigation. When the RCMP showed up at the hospital after Stefan had had this incident, he was really, really apprehensive and did not want to speak to the investigators at all. The initial notes that were taken about Stefan's incident, after not really being able to too closely examine him because he was not having any of this, they wrote down that it appeared that Stefan had taken something like burnt ash, like, you know when you have a fire and then there's all that black stuff sitting at the bottom, it's like the ash that's left over. It appeared as if he had taken that and just rubbed it all over his chest, and they said that despite how badly his hat was burned, it didn't appear as if he had had any burn marks on his actual head. So his hat was extremely damaged, but his head was completely fine. Like in most UFO cases similar to this one, the investigators were extremely apprehensive to believe Stefan's story, especially after they had found out that Stefan had been drinking heavily the night before the incident had taken place. But once Stefan had brought the RCMP and the investigators to the area where this had all happened, and they saw what appeared to be like concrete evidence that something had actually taken place in this spot, that is when they started to come around a little bit more and take this case very, very serious. Once investigators started searching the area in which Stefan had claimed that all of this had taken place, they did a bunch of tests on the area, and that is when they found that this entire area was extremely radioactive. Once this news kind of broke to the public health department, they had originally wanted the entire area to be quarantined because, for obvious reasons, they didn't want the public exposed to possible radiation. But it had later turned out that unknowingly to the investigators at the time, the radium ran under the entire area, which had then resulted in high levels of radiations all over the entire area, including the spot where Stefan had had this incident. A little while after this had all taken place, Stefan would then return back to the area in which he claimed that all of this would happen. I guess just kind of looking around, hoping to find some kind of evidence to back up his claims. And when he returned this time, he actually would find something that did seem to back up his claims. What he had found was a piece of material that was called molten material, and it was extremely radioactive. The material was sent to a lab to be analyzed, and it turned out that it was a material that was silver, but it was extremely difficult to obtain. It had been coated with a pitch blende ore, which was a blend of uranium and radium. Now, that would convince most people that Stefan's story was real because of how specific the material is and how difficult the material is to get and how it shouldn't have even been in that area. But of course, there were definitely people who were extremely skeptical about Stefan's claims, and so many people started to theorize that maybe somebody wanted Stefan's story to be true so badly that they had planted this material in that area. However, I just don't know why somebody would do that personally, especially if you strongly believe somebody's story. Why would you feel the need to plant this material there to prove it to who? Especially because it was years later, unless it was Stefan himself who planted that material there, it just wouldn't make sense. But that is really all of the information that there is on this case. Stefan had passed away in 1999 due to unrelated causes, but the burns all over his body that he had obtained that day during this experience still remained on him at the time that he had passed away. Stefan's family is still looking for answers as to what exactly happened that day out in the woods, but the Canadian government has classified this case as unsolved, and they have pretty much completely stopped looking into it. But guys, I would love to know your thoughts on this one, so please let me know what you think about this specific case in the comments down below. That brings us to the end of today's video. I was switching between saying Steven and Stefan throughout this entire video. I know that I was doing that. The man's name is Stefan. I don't know why I kept saying Steven, and I know that I did it a couple times, so I profusely apologize for that. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!